Hi guys. Welcome to my channel. Before we get started, make sure to hit that like button. And also subscribe to my channel. Top 10 Horror Stories Books. So make sure to watch the full video. In addition to being a genre, horror is also a technique, a strategy to force the audience to confront or explore something real. Horror movies used to terrify me as a child, but after watching my first one, I was hooked. But what really stuck out about the movies and books I adored the most was that, more often than not, the awful aspect was merely one of the things that made the story unique. The best horror films aren't just about scaring people. They also find a way to use their scares as a vehicle to examine whatever it is that they are trying to explore. Nevertheless, I wanted to talk about Australia, masculinity, and fear. Whether I succeeded in any of those endeavors is up to the opinion of others. But I've included below 10 of the horror novels that most influenced me. These are stories that, in many ways, revolutionized the horror genre by being much more than simple bumps in the night. There are many great reads to keep you on the edge of your seat, including best-selling fiction books, mysteries, and fantasy books, as well as classics, books on vampires, and true crime books. But is there anything more suspenseful than a terrifying book that keeps you from turning out the lights? Because of the adrenaline surge, some people enjoy reading horror novels. Others take pleasure in experiencing all the negative emotions, including fear, contempt, and fury. In either case, the best horror stories enthrall you and send you on a harrowing roller coaster. Others are rooted in fact and sufficiently recognizable to pique the reader's curiosity. We have the ideal books for you whether you love horror or are just starting out in the genre. We compiled a list of the top horror books of all time as well as some recent releases by searching libraries and bestseller lists for works praised by critics and readers. Of course, you'll discover the best Stephen King books here, as well as other books that have inspired some of our favorite spooky movies. 10 Red Dragon, written by Thomas Harris. The first Hannibal Lecter novel is still the best because it makes the argument that even heroes can harbor monstrous traits within them, and that even the most horrifying of evils can grow from an all-too-human source. The Silence of the Lambs receives all the attention, but it is not the best Hannibal Lecter novel. Each of Lecter's stories contains an implied Faustian bargain to some extent, but none is more heartbreaking than FBI criminal profiler Will Graham's decision to forego his own frail mental health in order to stop a killer he knows all too well. 9. The Portrait of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. In Oscar Wilde's first and only book, there are no true antagonists. This book's underlying threat is our potential for vanity. How it can physically and figuratively deform us, and how our concern with preserving beauty will unavoidably result in its obliteration. Even Dorian, the protagonist of Wilde's novel, is a tragic fool rather than a cunning mastermind. He is a young fool who is paralyzed by the neurotic conviction that beauty is the only thing worth getting at any price. His fall would be almost amusing if it weren't so terrifyingly plausible. 8. Joe Hill's Horns. Even in its darkest moments, fear occasionally serves as a mere prop. That is the case with the singular and utterly captivating Horns. A book that initially reads like a twisted revenge tale before expanding into something more expansive, tangled, and ultimately optimistic. Horns is a stinging satire on how quick we can be to judge despite the darkness we all harbor that alternates between being a gothic romance, murder mystery, supernatural thriller, and murder mystery. 7. William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist. In spite of all the blood, jump scares, and creepiness, the best horror stories frequently think that good will ultimately triumph. Because of how strongly we are made to care about the tragic condition of its key characters. And because each one of them is so meticulously described, The Exorcist has long been regarded as one of the most horrifying novels ever. The book's, and film's, appeal mostly stems from the final hard-won victory of a small group that gives all for an innocent child. The evil they fight is vast and incomprehensible, but not, in the end, insurmountable. 6. The translation of Koji Suzuki's Ring by Robert B. Romer and Glyn Wally. A cursed VHS story with a scary and all too human tale of realizing your own insignificance in the face of powers beyond your knowledge. This story's genuine power has not been adequately conveyed in any of the subsequent cinematic versions. Although Suzuki's horror fable Ring is a classic, it was in its 2 sequels that he showed the breadth of his vision, naturally expanding it to create something far more grand and profound than any cinematic adaptation has yet to realize. 5. Psycho by Robert Bloch. To be clear, the movie is superior to Jaws. Hitchcock used a number of deft changes to find fresh ways to sway the viewer by instilling a sense of concern. Yet, Bloch's work is where the shower scene, the mansion on the hill, the surprise ending, and the general atmosphere of gothic dread permeating every scene all first appeared, giving Psycho its status as an enduring cultural lightning rod. Without this book, horror and cinema wouldn't be the same. This is where the delighted convention defying that Hitchcock gets all the credit for begins. 4. Justin Cronin's The Passage. A sprawling story of love, loss, and societies that are destroyed, rebuilt and then destroyed again. Justin Cronin's epic vampire saga is centered not only on characters we could care about deeply but also on a slowly developing sense of insidious evil whispering from the shadows. A terror so unknowable that it was always going to lose a little menace once it was explained. But like the finest horror authors, Cronin makes his point about how often evil arises from a place that is a little more understandable than we might want to face, by using that inevitability. The first book in the trilogy is the finest because it has a unique atmosphere of building dread. However, the entire trilogy is fantastic. 3. Stephen King's Misery. The book Misery, written by a writer who attempted to move away from horror but discovered that his sizable fanbase wouldn't accept it, has an addictive blend of rage, despair, and catharsis at its core. Bring on the tale of a writer who is held captive by a fan who tortures him into writing what she wants, leading to the writer's gradual realization that the genre he had been so anxious to leave may actually be the only one that is right for him. It's one of the best books ever written about the highs and lows of creativity, and it's also a deeply personal and ambivalent book. 2. From Hell by Eddie Campbell and Alan Moore. I'm not sure if it counts as cheating to put a graphic novel on this list, but this is a horror masterpiece, unlike anything I've ever read. It's a huge, phone book-heavy investigation of not only the Jack the Ripper murders but also the culture that allowed them to happen. The book is an almost forensic analysis of Victorian England, unflinching and harsh, grim and purposeful. And it suggests that the murder's motivations, a collision of dogma, classism, and puritanical propriety, were the inevitable outcome of the real human horrors that pervaded a society that appeared to be polite. 1. French, Tana's Book in the Woods. I am aware that this is not horror, at least not in the sense that it is now available in bookstores. But I'd also contend that it isn't a typical crime book or literary character study either. The only written scene that has ever made me jump is found in the Book in the Woods, which employs the structure of a whodunit to craft one of the most chilling explorations of fear I've ever read. The scene is so powerfully imbued with the force of an unshakable nightmare that it completely changes the book around it, and leaves readers with the impression that some evils can never be fully understood and some trauma is too great to move on from. If that doesn't capture fear at its most vivid, I don't know what would. So, that's it for today. We hope you enjoyed the video. Use the comments section below to tell us what you think about the video. Also, make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell button to be notified of all the latest videos.